Now, Russia has once again stressed that there is no military solution to the crisis in Syria. President Vladimir Putin was speaking with Jordan's King Abdullah II in Moscow. This came 2 days after the Syria talks in Kazakhstan. Iran, Russia and Turkey agreed to monitor the ceasefire in Syria. Forces belonging to the Libyan National Army have taken control of a long-contested area in eastern city of Benghazi. Libyan forces have been battling to flush out militants from Benghazi for 2 years. Libya plunged into chaos after the fall of longtime leader Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. Nigerian police have used tear gas to disperse protesters demanding the release of the leader of the Islamic movement in Nigeria. The country has launched a heavy crackdown on the followers of the movement. Hundreds of IMN followers were killed in an attack on the city of Zaria in 2015. The bodies of 4 more firefighters have been pulled out from under the rubble of a high-rise which collapsed in the Iranian capital, Tehran, last week. This has brought the death toll to 19. The landmark shopping complex crumbled after a huge fire. In Bahrain, several people have been injured as regime forces attacked demonstrators holding a sit-in in the village of Deraz. Police forces used tear gas and live ammunition. The protest came just days after the execution of 3 anti-regime activists in the tiny Persian Gulf Kingdom. Celebrations of Australia's National Day have been marred by protests piling pressure on the government to acknowledge Indigenous suffering. The protesters took part in what they called Invasion Day rallies in Sydney and other cities. Australia Day celebrates the arrival of the first British colonists in Sydney. 6 people, including 4 firefighters, have been killed while battling massive forest fires in central Chile. The raging flames have destroyed nearly 200,000 hectares of land, forcing mass evacuations. This has been the country's worst forest fire ever.
قبل بشهرين كانت خوف ضرب وقصف ودمار وين ما نقدر نوقف على البسطه طاول، والبسطه فيها نوعين من الرزق، 3 انواع تشكيله بس، بقدونس ونعناع وفجل ورشاد. هلا الحمد لله اسعار كثير كويسه ورزق كله، يعني الزبونات عم تزود ما عم تنقص الحمد لله رب العالمين.
هلا الامور اختلفت. هلا يعني هلا صارت امام تطلع الساعه ايمد من كان تطلع مأمن على حالك، مأمن على حالك. يعني ظروف هلا المعيشه بدها شوي تدريجيا. يعني نحن هلا الحطب قلت لك هالصوب وعندي الولد كلنا بروب بلم لي كيس عم نتدفى ماشي الامور.
Mexico slams an executive order by U.S. President Donald Trump to start the construction of a border wall between the 2 countries.
I regret and condemn the United States' decision to pursue the construction of a wall that, far from uniting us, has been dividing us for years. Mexico does not believe in walls. I have said it time and again. Mexico will not pay for any wall.
The Mexican president made the comments in a televised speech to the nation. He also pledged to protect Mexican immigrants residing in the U.S.
2.5 years after the pro-West politicians came to power in Ukraine on promises to fight chronic bribery, the government's progress in fighting corruption is viewed as slow. Ukraine scored 29 points out of 100 possible in the Corruption Perception Index compiled by the anti-graft NGO Transparency International. This is an improvement of only 4 points compared to the results of 2013, before the pro-West uprising took place in Kiev.
We saw officials being detained at the cabinet meetings in airports and elsewhere, but the fact is that Kiev's achievements in fighting bribery is not appreciated in the world.
Economists say bribe takers in the judiciary and fiscal authorities damage business climate and scare off the foreign investment even more than the conflict in eastern Ukraine. While market expects that the conflict remain frozen for a certain future, it's not possible to do business in a country without rule of law.
The fight in corruption, it's something that the Ukrainian government can work on. And can make a significant progress about. It can reform the law enforcement agencies and courts, but very little progress has been made over the last 2.5 years.
In 2016, the rating was improved due to the launch of freshly created anti-corruption bodies and transparent state procurement mechanisms. But experts say these initiatives will not work unless Ukraine implements judiciary reform that may take from 3 to 7 years.
We do not have this time. That's why, along with the reform of all judiciary, it's important to create a system of special anti-corruption courts. The current legislation allows this, and we can do it within 1 year. As of now, the virtual inability to punish a corrupt official ruins the trust to all government steps in fighting graft.
Bribery remains the most topical issue in the conflict-hit Ukraine, along with the war and the high cost of life. Experts say that while the authorities take steps to fight corruption, the lack of rule of law renders most of the anti-graft efforts ineffective.
Using pickaxes, shovels and diggers, rescuers pulled the last bodies from the wreckage of this Italian hotel on Wednesday night. A week after an avalanche razed the building in central Italy, everyone who is known to be inside is accounted for, raising the final death toll to 29. 11 people survived. Adults and children dug out from under the ice and snow days after the disaster. The last human survivors found on Saturday. Italian firemen did pull 3 Abruzzo sheepdog puppies from the rubble earlier this week, raising hope more people would be found alive. Instead, the last 2 bodies discovered on Wednesday night. The avalanche struck in the wake of heavy snowstorms and several powerful earthquakes on January 18th. Many guests had wanted to leave the hotel but couldn't because the access road was blocked by snow. Local media reporting early emergency calls weren't taken seriously and rescuers were dispatched hours too late and then had to battle poor road conditions. The first rescue team arrived by ski 11 hours after the avalanche hit. Prosecutors investigating if there were failings in the emergency response and if anyone should be held responsible for the tragedy, as Italy's government promises to find the truth.
We cannot forget about you. We will not cower to fear. We are Americans just like you.
This is what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. This is what America looks like. This is what America. No fear. Immigrants are welcome here. No hate. No fear. Immigrants are welcome. Whenever you see a government that is lawless, you've got an obligation and a duty to do what? Resist! 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 I shout out, Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter! This has to go, hey, hey! Ho, ho! Donald Trump has got to go, hey, hey! Ho, ho!
Bless you, Mardi Gras.
Our time now 4:33. Let's get to breaking news from Portsmouth. An overnight chase ended with a suspect in custody.
Police say the chase started near Duke Street and Richmond Avenue. It ended at Charleston Avenue, not far from Deep Creek Boulevard. Rico Bush was at the scene this morning to talk with police. He now joins us from police headquarters. And Rico, what have you learned?
Well, Don, Katie, as you mentioned, police do have a man in custody. A source tells me that they believe that car may have been stolen. We're told that that car chase started just before 2:45 this morning on Richmond Avenue. It lasted about 10 minutes. Police caught that man on Charleston Avenue just before 3 this morning. That is only a few blocks away. Dispatchers tell us no one was hurt during that chase. Now, we're still working to get some more details for you about this car chase, including some information on that suspect and possible charges. Once we get that information, we'll be sure to pass it along. That's the very latest here from Portsmouth this morning. I'm Rico Bush. 10 on your side.
Now, the Nigerian police have used tear gas to disperse members of the Islamic movement in Nigeria who were peacefully protesting in front of the National Assembly building. They demand the release of their leader, Sheikh Ibrahim Zakzaki.
Tonight we are staying on top of breaking news. Arrests made on the Boulder campus after hosting a controversial speaker. Denver 7's Jennifer Kowaleski heard from people on both sides tonight, inside and outside.
Not all gay people are scared of Milo or Trump.
I'm not assuming that you're saying these things.
A flurry of conflict over opposing ideas.
I love Milo. I'm classier than him. Period.
Despite a heavy police presence.
Their job is to protect and serve.
More than 100 protesters held up signs.
Milo, God loves you just as you are.
Chanted and even burned a Trump supporter's hat and a Nazi flag. Well, the crowd raged outside.
The loony politics of everyone in this town. And did I mention the hippies?
Inside, controversial conservative Breitbart editor Milo Yiannopoulos called out the protesters.
The politics, I have the wrong opinions, like you have the wrong opinions, deplorable opinions. That's what makes me dangerous. That's what all those people outside are so upset about.
Before taking on feminism and social justice to a sold-out crowd.
I think he's got a really incredible intellect.
Robin Davenport bought tickets to his speech months ago and was disheartened to find this threatening email in her inbox on the way to the event.
I think it's kind of awful that they were able to hack into the email list and try to send that. And it might intimidate some people.
Yiannopoulos also put the hackers on blast.
What do they think's going to happen? They're going to email you to death.
Back outside, passions stayed high as police arrested one protester.
And we had late word tonight that we have 2 more arrests out there in Boulder, bringing the total number to 3.
Human Rights Watch has expressed concern over U.S. President Donald Trump's plan to allow the CIA to reopen overseas black sites used to torture suspects after 9/11 attacks.
And because Guantanamo is now there as an ongoing detention facility, it is an invitation for Trump to start refilling it, which I'm afraid Trump is determined to do. And it's worth noting that one thing we expect either today or later in this week is an order from Trump to begin exploring or considering, or some kind of word like that, the resumption of CIA dark sites. But what's the point of these black sites other than to use torture? That's why they were created in the first place.
HRW director says if Trump allows the use of torture and other forms of inhumane and cruel interrogation, it will be a violation of rights laws. Meanwhile, Trump says that he supports waterboarding during interrogations despite it being prohibited. The new U.S. president added that he felt the practice worked but would consult with his cabinet on whether to use it. The procedure is widely regarded as a form of torture. The rights group official has also slammed an expected U.S. temporary ban on Syrian refugees, calling it cruel and pointless.
Our approaches to policies may differ, but surely, there exists a common commitment to public service and to compassion for those that we serve.
The Georgia congressman nominated to head the Department of Health and Human Services faces another hearing in Washington today. Tom Price represents the 6th District, which includes parts of Fulton, DeKalb, and Cobb counties. His nomination is backed by Republicans, but he's under fire from Democrats for his support for tearing down Obamacare and for his past stock trades.
The drugs Actelion makes treat rare diseases. Pulmonary hypertension, for example, is thought to affect less than 1 in 20,000. But that's exactly what makes the Swiss firm attractive. High prices, high margins that Johnson & Johnson has agreed to buy for $30 billion.
Actelion is the darling of European biotech. You don't get much better than Actelion, and the drugs that they have created for hypertension, pulmonary hypertension, are industry leaders. You're buying into the expertise.
The deal values Actelion's shares at $280, 23% more than Wednesday's close, and more than 80% over where they were when takeover talks began in November. But even so, the deal doesn't include Actelion's R&D unit. That's being spun off as a separate company led by the firm's founder. But Johnson & Johnson clearly feel it's money well spent, a look ahead perhaps to prices post-Trump.
You'd have to say that if the Trump presidency is for anything, it's keeping intellectual property within the United States and profiting from that. So it'd be interesting to see whether we start to see pharmaceutical prices outside of the US rise as a result.
Shares already have. Actelion stock jumping 20% on news of the sale.
An Agawam police officer has pleaded not guilty to allegations that he stole from his union, the Agawam Police Patrolmen's Association. Gary Nardi was in Hamden Superior Court this morning for his arraignment. On January 2nd, State Attorney General Maura Healey announced that Nardi had been indicted by a grand jury in connection with allegedly stealing $10,000 from the union. Nardi was the treasurer of that union from 2011 to May of 2016. That's when the AG's office began investigating and when Nardi was placed on paid administrative leave. Authorities say that he used 3 schemes to steal the money. Nardi is free on his own recognizance but had to give his passport to his lawyer and cannot contact 3 union members. His pretrial hearing is set for April 26th.
columnas de medio del puente.
Learning more about a murder overnight near 35th Avenue in Thunderbird. Police on the ground and in the air searching for the person who shot a man and left him in the middle of the street. Phoenix police telling us the victim was checking on his neighbor's house when he saw someone coming out of that house. The victim pulling out a BB gun to confront the suspect. The suspect pulled out a real gun and shot the man and then took off in a waiting car.
Breaking news.
Mayors of U.S. cities have reacted with outrage as President Donald Trump signed an order to block funding to municipalities that refuse to report undocumented immigrants. The mayors said they are prepared for a protracted fight against the decision. The officials added that they would defend all people regardless of where they come from. Trump's order targeted the so-called sanctuary cities and counties, which generally do not comply with federal requests to detain undocumented immigrants. The order claims that shielding the immigrants causes immeasurable harm to the American people. Nearly 500 jurisdictions are likely to fall under the order, including New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Chicago, as well as smaller cities.
The death of another Brooklyn child is the subject of a highly critical report from the city's Department of Investigation. 3-year-old Jaden Jordan died after he was allegedly beaten by his mother's boyfriend in November. Investigators say ACS committed significant errors in Jaden's case. Now, according to an ACS report, 2 days before the alleged beating, it received a report with the incorrect address that Jaden was being abused. But investigators determined that ACS had access to databases that would have provided the correct address.
Australia's National Day have been marred by protests piling pressure on the government to acknowledge Indigenous suffering. The protesters took part in what they called Invasion Day rallies in Sydney and other cities. Australia Day celebrates the arrival of the first British colonists in Sydney. 6 people, including 4 firefighters, have been killed while battling massive forest fires in central Chile. The raging flames have destroyed nearly 200,000 hectares of land, forcing mass evacuations. This has been the country's worst forest fire ever.
قبل بشهرين كانت
Mexico slams an executive order by U.S. President Donald Trump to start the construction of a border wall between the two countries.
I regret and condemn the United States' decision to pursue the construction of a wall that, far from uniting us, has been dividing us for years. Mexico does not believe in walls. I have said it time and again. Mexico will not pay for any wall.
The Mexican president made the comments in a televised speech to the nation. He also pledged to protect Mexican immigrants residing in the U.S.
2.5 years after the pro-West politicians came to power in Ukraine,
the country has launched a heavy crackdown on the followers of the movement. Hundreds of IMN followers were killed in an attack on the city of Zaria in 2015. The bodies of 4 more firefighters have been pulled out from under the rubble of a high-rise which collapsed in the Iranian capital, Tehran, last week. This has brought the death toll to 19. The landmark shopping complex crumbled after a huge fire. In Bahrain, several people have been injured as regime forces attacked demonstrators holding a sit-in in the village of Deras. Police forces used tear gas and live ammunition. The protest came just days after the execution of 3 anti-regime activists in the tiny Persian Gulf Kingdom. Celebrations of
خوف ضرب وقصف ودمار وين ما نقدر نوقف على البسطة طاول، والبسطة فيها نوعين من الرزق، 3 أنواع تشكيلة بس، بقدونس ونعناع وفجل ورشاد. هلا الحمد لله أسعار كتير كويسة ورزق كله، يعني الزبونات عم تزود ما عم تنقص، الحمد لله رب العالمين.
هلا الامور اختلفت هلا، يعني هلا صارت امام تطلع الساعه ايمد من كان تطلع مأمن على حالك، مأمن على حالك، يعني ظروف هلا المعيشه بدها شوي تدريجيا يعني نحن هلا الحطب قلت لك هالصوب وعندي الولد كلنا بلم لي كيس عم نتدفى ماشي الامور.
Now, Russia has once again stressed that there is no military solution to the crisis in Syria. President Vladimir Putin was speaking with Jordan's King Abdullah II in Moscow. This came 2 days after the Syria talks in Kazakhstan. Iran, Russia, and Turkey agreed to monitor the ceasefire in Syria. Forces belonging to the Libyan National Army have taken control of a long-contested area in eastern city of Benghazi. Libyan forces have been battling to flush out militants from Benghazi for 2 years. Libya plunged into chaos after the fall of longtime leader Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. Nigerian police have used tear gas to disperse protesters demanding the release of the leader of the Islamic movement in Nigeria.